everybody? Welcome back, Forge Your Path podcast, episode number 10. I am really excited to share this one today because I think this topic is probably one of the most important topics out there. And I think it's really, really misunderstood. And after reading this book, I should say after rereading this book, I just have such a renewed sense of what this topic really is all about and how to cultivate this attribute. So, as you see right here before me, the confident mind. You can see how it's dog-eared. I've got a kind of a ripped copy here. That's because I'm a huge fan of it, and I'm just rediscovering this book for the second time. I love coming back to a book on my bookshelf that I haven't seen for a year and then refinding it again, because you read it the second time, you find all those nuggets that you remembered and forgot. So I love this book, and it's a great one to come back to. So why did I come back to it this weekend? Well, in business, we had a tougher month, right? And sometimes February is that kind of month where you don't have the gas in the tank like you had in the new year, or January, we crushed it, setting new records, everything's popping. And then in February, what happens? Gloss wears off a little bit. Maybe that New Year's resolution, that freshness, all kind of starts to fade. And February doesn't really have that kind of distinct inherent motivation that maybe other months do. So we struggle a little bit. So at any rate, I always come back to this. So in the weekend, I was having that real brief think about, what went wrong per se, or really just what happened. I shouldn't even say what went wrong, but just ultimately, why were the numbers low? And on one hand, you have those voices in your head, right? The voices of doubt, the voices of anxiety, nervousness, all the reasons and the stuff where you start thinking, hey, am I not good enough? Hey, I might be doing great, but maybe we're hitting a point here where we're headed into a tougher time. All that, I'll call it negative or unproductive self-talk. And that's why this book is so dynamite. So by rediscovering it, it helped me root and center back into some practices that to me have been very valuable to me for a long time. So let me go into three areas of the confident mind that I love. So Dr. Nate Zinzer is the director of performance psychology at West Point. So obviously being responsible for the United States Military Academy goes without saying. He's got one of the most important jobs in this country, because he's molding the young men and women who are responsible for our safety, our future leadership. And he's an incredible asset to them. He's also worked with a number of federal agencies and local agencies like the FDNY, the FBI, as well as pro athletes from Eli Manning to the Philadelphia Flyers. This guy really knows his stuff. So let me bring in 3 points that I really think could help anybody in terms of just developing an idea around confidence, and maybe more importantly, some practices that are a key to developing it. So first thing, one of the pieces that I love about this book, and it reinforces the idea of what's called the first victory. So whether your arena is sports and you're a high school or college athlete and that's your domain, whether it's business and you are trying to slay the dragons of building a startup, or just hitting your numbers on a sales team or some other endeavor, or your challenges elsewhere. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's something else entirely. He mentions this idea of what's called the first victory. So quite simply put, the first victory is right here. His idea is you really have to win between the ears before you go out and execute and do anything else. And what I love, which kind of bookends this particular piece, is that in the beginning, there's a quote from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And on the last page, as you wrap up the book, it comes back to it as well. And I'm going to read it here. It says victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Let me read that again. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. What a dynamite quote, and one that's timeless. And I think it's so true, because you can roll into your day and simply just take that average approach, and you're leaving it completely up to luck. You might win some days because good things happen, and of course you're going to be in a great mental frame. But what happens when that first adversity strikes? Are you equipped? Are you going to handle it at your best optimal performance? Or are you going to let it impact you and then impact the rest of your day? So I love this idea about the first victory and practices around that. So the book definitely details some different ways to do that, from visualization and other techniques as well, to get yourself in the right mental frame. Again, I think you got to pick it up and dive into it. But again, just the idea of the first victory of how you approach your day. And I'm personally a big believer in the morning routine. So as far as how you get there, I think there's multiple ways to do that. For me, meditate, visualize, work out. Those are kind of the big three in my morning routine. By doing that, my mental capacity is going to be so much greater because I'm focusing on the right things. My mind is quiet. I'm focusing on the things that I want as opposed to the things that I don't want. And then naturally, by going and attacking my workout, I've got some discipline I've built into my day. And then the endorphins from that are just going to make me feel great. And I know before I head into my workday, I've primed my mind to look for the things that are important. And then physically, I'm feeling great, which is, of course, going to have that dual impact on my mentality. So I love the first victory. Here's the second piece. Second piece is the idea of what confidence is and what confidence isn't. To me, this is perhaps the most important part of the book. So I think that you would know, as far as you looking at others, you know when you see confidence, right? You know when you see somebody who's on a roll and that has momentum in some area because they've got confidence. It's extremely rare that I've seen anybody have great success without confidence. And so you know when you can see that momentum in others and how they carry themselves, what they do, and just the ease at which it appears they're operating. So I used to think for a very long time, and I occasionally do still find myself getting trapped in this fallacy that confidence is like a silver bullet, that once you have it, you will have it forever. Or it's like, you know, the Harry Potter Felix Felicis, liquid luck. You drink a vial of that, and instead of having it being a short-term 1-hour boost, you've got confidence forever. Now, look, I do feel as though when you do reach certain levels and you have certain breakthroughs, that you will attain a certain level of confidence from having done that. But if you don't manage that properly, that confidence can wane, and you can probably tell yourself a story that that was just fleeting. It was just temporary. So here's the idea of confidence as a metaphor that I love that Dr. Zinzer introduces. He talks about confidence like sand dunes. And if you've ever been to the Jersey Shore or really any beach, you know what sand dunes look like. And what happened to sand dunes? Sand dunes are built up over the course of time. You use front end loaders and you pack the sand, and it protects the beach. And then what happens every day? Waves roll in and the sand dunes shrink because that erosion over time is going to pull it down. So then what happens? You bring the loaders back in, and now you refortify the sand dunes. So I love this metaphor with confidence, because if you think about it, what are your practices to reinforce your confidence? What if confidence you looked at, instead of being a silver bullet or some unicorn out there that you're trying to catch that strikes when it strikes like magic, and then it disappears. Instead, are there practices that we can systematically build where every day we're building back up the sand dunes? I think this is the most important thing I've ever heard on competence. And what are some of those practices? Well, this I do very specifically remember. He talks about the importance of, at the end of each day, to think about jotting down a couple of things, having a growth journal and jotting down what are some ways you got better today, some specific ways in which you improved, some specific ways in which you grew. And if you do that every day as a practice, this is the way your dunes are fortified. Naturally, if you get good as a skill and start pointing your brain towards these small victories every day, well, look, of course, when you get that big deal, you win that big game or have that other breakthrough, of course, that's going to boost your sand dunes. But if you only do that when you win, well, then you're going to get the little erosion. And then occasionally when the big wave comes in, you're going to have the big dip. So by fortifying your dunes every day, by focusing on practices like that, your confidence never dips below a certain level. He also talks about, in terms of a practice, when you do a after action review at the end of a day, let's say you did have some things that were unsatisfactory for you. Well, if you can be realistic and analyze what happened, it gives you the learning. And if you can also see those mistakes as temporary and situational, as opposed to permanent and an attribute or characteristic of yourself, then you've got a good chance. So to put it in other words, hey, in that situation, that was a setback, or that was an underperformance because of this, as opposed to I'm terrible, I stink, I'm a failure, I'm worthless, and all the negative self-talk that we like to do. So seeing those setbacks as temporary and situational as opposed to personal and permanent, huge difference. So love this idea about the sand dunes. And I'll challenge you to think about what are your practices that you can start doing to fortify those dunes every day. Number 3, the bus driver. So I love this idea at the end of the book, where in one of the closing chapters, Dr. Zinsser talks about his time when he's younger. He's a PhD student at the University of Virginia. And he's in New Orleans for a workshop or a conference of some kind. And he gets on the bus, and this bus driver's got this big booming voice and says, "Good morning." And he greets him and is kind of taken aback by his energy and greets him back and says, "Good morning." And he sees this bus driver do this every time people get on the bus. And then at some point, he says the following: "Good morning, everybody. It's a great day in New Orleans. I hope you have a great day. If you're having a bad day, change your mind and make it a great day." How often have you heard something like that? I don't think I've perhaps ever heard someone think about it like that. So what a cool concept. Instead of thinking about if I'm having a bad day, that it's just predetermined in some way, change your mind and make it a great day. What if you, instead of telling yourself you're having a bad week or a bad month or a bad quarter or a bad year, change your mind and make it a great day, make it a great week, make it a great month, make it a great quarter, make it a great year, make it a great lifetime. To me, there's so much power in that. Change your mind and make it something better. So, God, how powerful could that be if we started doing those call outs to ourselves when we have the awareness and we're in the middle of a so-called self-perceived bad stretch? Change your mind and make it great. So to me, that's super powerful. And it's also kind of challenging me to up my awareness about how I'm labeling my days, how I'm labeling certain stretches of different areas of my life, whether that's health, career, relationships with my family, finances, or some other domain. So having the power to change your mind and make it something else completely flips the script. So again, thank you, Dr. Zinsser. Confident Mind is a great read. I think this book's been out for about a year and maybe not even a year and a half. But man, as this podcast grows, as this message grows, I'd love to have Dr. Zinser on and have a chance to talk with him further, because I think it's a fascinating concept. And to me, it's one of the most, not just motivational, but practical books I've ever read to give those strategies. Because look, again, we all know what confidence looks like, and you sure as heck know when you have it. And even more prominently, you know when you don't. But rather than thinking it's something out of your control and something that is completely fleeting, or you're waiting for someone to, again, touch you with that magic wand, you've got the ability to build these practices. You've got the ability to build routines to enhance your confidence, rather than just waiting for good days and bad days to happen, and for you to let your confidence just float and oscillate like the stock market. So pick up the book. Thank you, Dr. Zinser, for giving me this motivation as I head here into this section here of March. In this first full week, I am totally flipping the script in terms of what I'm calling and labeling last month. And now I know, as a last thought, this is a great way to be able to approach this month. Because one more point, so I'm going to give you 4 today, is what's called the shooter's mentality. And by shooter's mentality, I'm talking about like a basketball shooter. So you think about the late, great Kobe Bryant. When he would go on a tough streak, right? Or really most basketball players, if they missed their first 4 shots from the field, 5 shots in the field, God forbid 8 or 10 shots from the field, most players are going to be panicked, because they went 0 for 8, and they'll start to label, this is an off night. I don't have it this game. Someone like Kobe Bryant, who's got this shooter's mentality, he actually thinks the opposite. So because I've had a bad night so far and I've missed my first 8 shots, well, I know my percentages. I know my averages. So I'm excited now, because I know there's a good chance I make 7 out of my next 8 shots. I make 6 out of my next 9 shots. Maybe I make my next 10 in a row, because on average, that's what I do. So when I come off of this month that is maybe underperforming, instead of choosing to wallow in that or to start to focus on negativity, I actually remembered to embrace the shooter's mentality. So I'm bringing incredible energy this week and this month to my team, because I know that month in, month out, we do perform. So after a down month, history dictates that we're going to have a great month. And that's the message that I am bringing to my team today. That's the message I'm going to bring to my team this week and this month, because I know what we are capable of. And it's simply, if we can focus on that, then there's no reason we can't have another great month and maybe break some new records. So remember that as well as a final thought as you head into this week, this month, this quarter. If you're coming off that underperformance, take that shooter's mentality and be excited about the opportunity, as opposed to telling yourself some other story that's less than. So that's it for today. Thank you, everybody. Loving all the feedback from the podcast. Keep spreading the message, and we'll keep cracking this thing up week in, week out. Have a great day. I'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it on social media. Also, if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs, please see the show notes for the link to my website. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.